There's only one phrase that I need to add from chapter 17, because we've already learned about fiscal policy throughout the semester since day one, really. But what I want to do is show you how I'm going to test you and then teach you that one thing through the context of how I'm going to test you on for the final. So I've got two study guides. The one in front of you looks just like this. Your test is going to look in the face-to-face class where you're going to get some hints. The online class isn't going to get these hints. You know, this is contractionary monetary policy. We did this last class, so I'm going to skip this one and go to what today's chapter is about. We did this once before a couple of weeks ago, but there's one thing I need to add in this market for you to have full credit. And so this is fiscal policy. So this is the government trying to stimulate our economy when we're in a recession. And what I'm going to give you in the you guys here in the face-to-face class is I'm going to give you that this market supply curve looks like this. And I might even say something that supply curve moves for monetary policy, the demand curve moves for fiscal policy. So I might say something like that, put this up on the board like this under money market and say this moves for fiscal policy, this moves for monetary policy. And so this is when we're in a recession. So draw all these markets in equilibrium, showing this one with a recession, and then we'll go from there. See what you remember. Remember, you can print out the other study guide that we'll look at next class just without these hints and practice that. Make sure you're doing that to study for this. Don't just look at this and say you got it. Make sure you print out blank ones and start practicing on those. I see some people are doing that for a while. Oh, note that this question doesn't have all the X and Y axes, but you will have a question that does have these questions with all your X and Y axes. So be sure to look through the test because some parts of the test help inform you of things in other parts of the test. So you'll have quantity dollars, GDP real, capital I, ROW dollar, interest rates, PL. So those are your X and Y axes for these. Here we are with the recessionary gap right there. And we're in a recession. And so fiscal policy, remember, is Congress and the president agreeing on our levels. And for this class, let's just say it's personal taxes and government spending. And so what would they do? What would they do with taxes and government spending to try to stimulate the economy? When we're in a recession, yeah. Will they raise or lower government spending? They want to stimulate the economy. Yeah, they're going to raise government spending. So here, put G up arrow. Or they're going to, personal taxes do what? Yeah, lower personal taxes. And so right down here, you just need to say this is government spending. And this is personal taxes. It's not common for fiscal policy or for our Congress to pass business taxes. That's to just stimulate the economy because that changes the incentive structure of a whole society. You know, what we're trying to do is just get people to spend more money to stimulate our economy. And so you don't have to do this in your answer, but let's do this over here to remind ourselves of something that we spend more government money than we take in tax revenue. And so we have that what right here. What's that called? That difference? Yeah, the budget deficit, which means we have to what? If we want to spend more than we take in, we have to borrow money. And so in this case, what I like to do here is I like to put G up arrow, circle it just to remind me that part of AD. Remember how in each one of these we circle a component of AD. And so they're going to try to raise government spending. So notice if they raise government spending and or lower personal taxes that lowers revenue, you've got a larger budget deficit, meaning the government needs to borrow more money. And so the government's borrowing more money, it is demanding more money from the public. And all things equal, that would put upward pressure on interest rates. So here, down below, we'd say, due to increase G, government needs to borrow more money. Therefore, demand for money increases and interest rates rise. Well, that's not always the case, but there's certainly, and I say in the study guide module that has a video of me going over this, that it puts upward pressure on interest rates because there's limited money, and when more people demand something, the price of that thing goes up. The price of money is an interest rate. Remember, these interest rates will always go together. And so who is the supply in the loanable funds market? Banks and investors. And it's investors who buy up government debt. When the government needs to raise money, they issue government debt. And so investors invest in that government debt. And so that means they have less money to lend out to businesses. So our supply curve moves in. And again, notice our interest rates in both markets will always move in the same direction. Note here that higher interest rates can lead to lower investment spending. What else do we know from that demand side formula? What's going to change with higher interest rates? You and me, what might you and I do less of? Yeah, so let's put that here. Also with the higher interest rates, it's going to be less consumption. Here's the one point I need to add that we haven't added yet from chapter 17. So due to government borrowing, investors buy government debt, decrease in supply available to business. And so the new phrase is, this is called crowding out. Crowding out is when government borrows money, it crowds out money that could be used by businesses. Remember, this demand is businesses and this is business investment. So it's crowding that out. There's only so much money out there to be invested, and the government's offering you a government investment in government debt. So some people take that, which limits the amount of money that's going to private investment. So that's the only new thing today. But I'm going to add something today that's an extra credit question that kind of calls this into question. And so now we have higher interest rates. What are people around the world going to do? People with money all over the world. They're going to want to put some money here in interest-bearing accounts, so they're going to demand more dollars. And that increased demand for dollars is going to do what? What's this called? When our exchange rate goes up. Yeah, appreciation. And we know that an appreciation at this point lowers net exports. So here's that three-stage thing. US interest rates rise. Investors are attracted. Higher interest rates. These three dots here mean therefore, welcome to use them. Therefore, demand for dollar increases and dollar appreciates. Oops, that should be 2, and this should be 3. So now we have everything circled that we need to know over here. And recall when I went over this a couple of weeks ago, this is a conservative argument against government working to help our economy, because you've got this higher government spending that was financed by debt. And so let's just assume 82 right here with the higher government spending would get us out of the recession and have a little bit of inflation. So we can say AD increases due to higher government spending. But what have I left out? Beyond the price, what else? Right, these things here. So note the higher interest rates are going to likely reduce consumption, investment. It's going to appreciate our currency and lower our net exports, but lower I, lower consumption, lower net exports cause AD to shift in. And so here, let's show another point somewhere in between AD3, where notice, I'm going to put in a price level there, PL3. Notice that we've done this. The government figured out how much more money to spend to get us out of the recession, but the problem is we borrow money, given that we live in an era of budget deficits, and that borrowed money causes price of money or interest rates to go up, which causes all of these negative things to happen. And this is the case for not helping the economy through fiscal policy. But I'm going to come back. There's an extra credit question I'm going to get to here. It rebuts this, that goes against this. Rather than go there directly, let's go there through question, I think 3. So I'll leave this here, but go to the question that's expansionary monetary policy. That 3, 4, 9. Should I leave that up? What I had up there? Anybody? Yeah. Maybe take out your notes from last class and look at what we did. We did a handout of the opposite of this question. Good, Nikki? Okay, so on this one, again, like I say, I'm gonna give you this, I'm gonna give you this and this. Supply and demand, and I may tell you supply is monetary policy, demands fiscal policy. And then you have all these things to fill in down here. So if you would fill in all of these and then label all of this, and again, show us with the recession in the ASAD market. So in terms of monetary policy, what is RR? How much money banks are required to keep? Yeah, yeah, it is 10%, but it's called the reserve requirement. We need to know that. Okay, so hold on before we go to the next one. What's going to allow, so we're in expansionary policy. So what do they want to do with interest rates, the Federal Reserve? Lower them or raise them? Being in a recession. Lower them, right? In a recession, you want to stimulate growth. And so what would they need to do with the supply curve to lower interest rates? Yeah, shift it out. Notice that then leads to lower interest rates. Okay, now let's put RR up here, reserve requirement. What would they do? They want banks to lend out more money. They want to create more money. Remember, when a bank makes a loan, it's creating new money based on your deposits. So what are they going to do? Are they going to ask banks to keep more or less money? Yeah, less money. So they lower the reserve requirement. OMO are open market operations. So note here that when we try to use fiscal policy to get out of recession, the government borrows money by selling government debt. And so open market operations are using the fact that there's lots of government debt out there to either increase or decrease the supply of money. So open market operations are when the Federal Reserve either prints money and buys up debt. So think about this, they print money, they buy up debt. What are they doing? They're getting something, they're getting debt in return, and they're getting cash in people's hands. Or the other policy is they sell debt that they've purchased in the past. They take that debt, they sell it to the public, they take money, and they burn or shred that money. Which one are they going to do to get more money into people's pockets? Buy or sell. If they sell, they take the money and burn it. If they buy, they take the debt and give you cash they've created. Which one is it? Buy, yeah. So here on this one over here where it's smaller, you write buy bonds. And as an aside, the Federal Reserve in the last two recessions, because they were pretty massive, bought other things other than government debt. These are government debt. That's what a US bond is. They would buy other types of assets, just so you know. The last one are the rates where banks can borrow from each other or borrow directly from the Fed if they've loaned more than they're allowed to, and they need to borrow money to keep them at their reserve requirement at midnight each night. So this is called the federal funds and discount rate. Federal funds is bank to bank lending. Discount rate is the Fed to banks. Here we can just abbreviate FFR, DR. So what are they trying to do? They're trying to either incent banks to loan out everything and then borrow from another bank to have their required reserves, or they want to disincent banks from overlending. You're trying to increase the supply of money. What do you want banks to do? Loan out everything or not? Okay, if it's loan out everything, what do you want to do it for with the rate so that they get reserves overnight? You want to raise them or lower them? Yeah, you lower them. So you lower the federal funds, the discount rate. So all of those things shift out that supply of money. So all you need to say, just like that previous question, due to 3 policies above, supply of money increases and interest rates drop. Again, what do we know we're going to do more as individuals if interest rates are lower? Borrow and then spend via consumption, right? So consumption will increase. Yeah, above supply of money increases and interest rates decrease. Sorry about that. So remember, this is quantity dollars. This is GDP, what? Yeah, good, adjusted for inflation. This is, yeah, good, business investment. Remember, this is businesses borrowing money and investing in themselves. And we have the price level, interest rates, and this one. Trade, I heard. Good, trade weighted exchange rate. Now, what we're going to see here is everything works together to do the right thing. So because the Federal Reserve has increased the supply of money, banks and investors have more money. And again, notice interest rates between these two markets will always go in the same direction. Notice them both falling. We have more investment spending. Say here, Fed policy allows banks to create more money, shifting out supply. Okay, what happens here? Interest rates are lower. 1, 2, 3. US interest rates fallen. You got money all over the world. You're seeking high rates of return. Does that incent you to bring more money or less? Less. So demand shifts in. This deters investment in interest-bearing accounts. Remember my story here. I'm just saying you don't necessarily have to say exactly these words, but these are people who are sophisticated investors with money all over the world in all kinds of investments, and some of them are simply in insured interest-bearing accounts. Now that they see there's less return on those, they're deterred from investing in those. Therefore, we'll do my 3 dots that mean therefore demand decreases for dollar. And it, what's this called? It depreciates. What does that mean? That means foreign currencies are cheaper to us, so the products are cheaper to us. That means our currency is more expensive to foreigners, and so I don't know. Oops. Pardon me? Where? Yeah, therefore demand decreases. So our currency is now less valuable, so it takes more of our currency to buy foreign currency. It makes foreign products more expensive, so imports drop. Our currency is cheaper to the rest of the world, so our products are cheaper, so exports increase. So net exports do what? Yeah, they go up. Notice here, consumption, investment, net exports all go up. What does that mean? What curve shifts? Yeah, AD curve shifts. And let's assume a perfect world. And we get out to full employment. AD increases to YFE. So we're out of that recession. Now look at your sheet. If you've got both your sheets in front of you, the one we did last class and this class, there's an asymmetry. Economists call it a cyclical asymmetry. So the reality is the one you have in front of you that you did last class, contractionary policy, always works. If there is inflation, the Federal Reserve can raise interest rates to 1,000%. Who's buying a car at 1,000%? Who's buying a home at 1,000%? Right? Nobody. Right? So anytime there's inflation, don't worry, the Fed can kill it because they can raise interest rates. When I was in high school, we had really high price levels. So the Fed raised interest rates, so a car loan was 25%. Right? Not many people are going to buy a car with interest rates that high. So always contractionary policy that we worked on last class, that sheet, that will always work. Now, here, if it's expansionary, imagine you've lost your job, your neighbor's lost your job, there's no hope for the future, and the government lowers interest rates. Does that mean you're necessarily going to buy something? Does that mean necessarily businesses are going to invest more? They might not, right? There is this motion to have lower interest rates and it would stimulate us to borrow money. But if the recession is really bad and we don't have a job and lots of people don't have jobs and our hope is really low, this might not work. So what do you need? What policy would you just start with today? This is monetary. We started with fiscal. And what conservatives will say is fiscal policy has its drawbacks because it puts upward pressure on interest rates. Now, let's go to the rest of this, tune it out if you're already lost. But if you kind of got it, now we're going to bring it all together and show you what really happens. So you'll hear next time there's a Democratic administration trying to stimulate the economy, you will hear conservatives say fiscal policy doesn't work because it creates crowding out. They're not being totally truthful with you because you will never just do one of the policies on your own. You will do expansionary monetary and expansionary fiscal policy, right? So in that case, let's start with this: supply, demand. Let's again show us in a recession, so practice doing all those. Again, remember, you will have a question in the face-to-face class with all of your X and Y axes given to you. So if you forget, you got them somewhere. But they won't be on every question. What are our monetary policies? If we're trying to expand the economy and expand the supply of money, reserve requirements, FFR, DR, and then bonds. What are the things that are going to increase the supply of money? What are you going to do with the reserve requirement? Make banks keep more money or keep less? Keep less so they can loan more, and in other words, create more money through loans. To lower the reserve requirement. What are they trying to do now? They're trying to incent banks to overloan or disincent banks from overloaning. They want them to overloan. So what are they going to do with these rates? Yeah, good. They're going to lower them. And then how do they get money into people's hands? Yeah, they're going to print money and buy up debt that people have bought in the past. Now, fiscal policy. What will happen to government spending? What do they want to do? Stimulate the economy, so they're going to raise or lower it. Lower G, what happens on the demand side? Yeah, you can raise it, right? We're going to increase the AD side, increase the demand side, and then lower personal taxes. Yeah. Because like I was saying earlier, they generally don't try to stimulate the economy with business tax changes, because that changes everything around businesses profit margins, incentive structure, and all they're wanting to do is get money into people's pockets to stimulate the economy, not change the whole environment for business. Does that make some sense? So here, what's going to happen again? You've got more government spending than you got tax revenue in the modern day. So you got a budget deficit. If you're going to raise government spending and or lower tax rates, you're going to make a larger budget deficit. It means the government needs to borrow more money. So do this, show demand curve, but with a really long tail, E2. Meaning just having going out quite a bit. So note, with fiscal policy by itself, what would that do with interest rates? It would raise them. But if we're in a recession, the Fed, by law, if there's unemployment above 5%, it has to stimulate the economy. And so let's start first with this. Demand increases due to higher government spending because government must borrow more money. Read A. A states the Federal Reserve will increase the supply of money enough to ensure that interest rates decrease. So note here, it'll never just be one policy in a bad recession. It'll be both of these. And so the Fed is going to increase the interest rate or increase the supply of money so interest rates drop. So find a place along the second demand curve where you see that it'll have a lower interest rate along the y-axis. So maybe right here. And then show your supply curve intersecting at that point. So you see interest rates actually falling. So I'm going to write, but Fed increases supply of money enough to lower interest rates. So now everything's going to flow perfectly together now. This is how policy really works. So in a bad recession, the government might spend more money or lower personal taxes. So they need to borrow more money. But the Fed, by law, needs to also stimulate the economy. And so they stimulate it by increasing the money supply, lowering interest rates, and consumption should increase. Because the Fed is allowing banks and incenting banks to loan out more money, banks are going to be creating a greater money supply. Again, always these two markets are going to show the same change in interest rates. And so the rest of this is just about the same as expansionary monetary policy. Everything's going to work together. So here we have higher investment. So again, here we just say due to Fed policy, banks create more money. Interest rates are lower. Got money all over the world. You notice the United States is a less attractive place to bring your money to on an interest-bearing account. There's going to be less demand for money and the currency is going to depreciate. And that depreciation is going to lead to higher net exports. Or same three-step process here. US lowers interest rates. This attracts investors. I'm sorry, thank you, catching me here. Detracts, deters investors from bringing. I'm gonna say money, not a dollar sign, money here. 3, therefore dollar depreciates. So remember, as I was saying, monetary policy on its own in a recession doesn't always work because people are worried. And even if there's lower interest rates, they're not going to take out loans. The government steps in also at the federal level in terms of Congress and the president, and either raise government spending and or lower personal taxes to make sure there's more money going out there, while the Fed ensures that interest rates drop. So we get higher consumption, higher investment spending, higher net exports, and higher government spending. And so if we assume a perfect world, all of that work can get us out of that recession. What's the downside of all of this? What's the downside of all of this? Yeah, larger budget deficit. We have to borrow money to get out of it. So nothing for free, but at least this all can work together to get us any recession we hit, we can get out of it. Any near depression we ever get near with the right policy, we never have to have another depression ever in our nation's history because we know what to do. Now it's just politics. And for the last 3 recessions, both Democrats and Republicans have agreed, let's do this so we don't fall into a depression, and we haven't had one. So let's hope in your lifetime we never have one, as in mine. So last thing we need to say is higher consumption, higher government spending, higher investments, more business investment, higher net exports, shifts AD out. 2, I'm going to say YFE or full employment. So we're out of that recession. Take a second and just look over all the graphs that we've done now. We've done 1, 2, 3, 4. All of the ones, all the 4 market graphs that are part of this package. Oh, yeah. Just look them over, see the differences, see the commonalities. Take a second. There you got it. Yeah. This will be extra credit on the final. If you reach your maximum, throw this out. But if you can do it, you understand modern policy, how it actually works. And you're going to get an A on the test probably with this extra credit. You will either have this or this for neoclassical model. So maybe let's start with this one right here. You would go to your notes and look over your notes around this. Look this over, take a second, then I'll dive in with it. But first, look what you know already. Yeah. So your question 1 should be the one we did last class, contractionary monetary. Yeah. That good? Comments? That makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, my numbering on this, I think I just pulled from tests, so I don't think this is numbered well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to give you a chance. I've got another study guide where the numbers work perfectly, the one that's available online. I just wanted to get, these came from the actual final. That's why the numbers are a little goofy, but there are 2 different versions. Yeah, no, I got it. I was being efficient and my efficiency led to some confusion. Slap myself. I was just remembering this weekend that phrase, slap yourself. You need to use that more. Maybe not. You make a little mistake, Jorge, I say slap yourself. I think it's a fireable offense to tell people to hurt themselves. So remember this model here, neoclassical, they believe government only hurts things. It only gets in the way when it tries to help. And always, if government stays out of the way, we'll always be at full employment because the economy will always self-adjust. And so label all these here on this graph. Online class won't get this already set up for them because they got their notes in front of them. Who does better on my tests? Yeah, so those online, be sure to study. And then say what everything is down here. Just like ASAD, the other market in terms of the curves, they're just shown in a different format because we always come back to this long run equilibrium without government intervention according to their theory. Aggregate demand, all the demand in our economy, aggregate supply, all the supply in our economy, GDP, full employment for YFE. RAS is long run. Aggregate supply. Level and GDP adjusted for inflation. B&I decrease. What happens? This. So consumption and investment drop. What takes place here? Which curve is sig X? Yeah, AD and AD shifts in. AD shifts in. We fall into a recession, and we have a lower price level. According to them, people gather all available information, and we don't have money illusion, meaning we're aware when prices go up or down. And so we become aware that prices have gone down. What does that mean we know about ourselves? Yeah, I've started living it up. So AD shifts in, we have lower price level, and people become aware they have a higher standard of living. Remember my question to you guys, if I was your boss and we fall into a recession and I ask you, would you take a pay cut? Or all of you take a 10% pay cut, or I lay off 10% of you at random. Generally, most people wouldn't take the pay cut, right? They'd want to fire me because I can get unemployment insurance, I can get other kind of government assistance. But here in this case, people are going to accept pay cuts because they realize they have a higher standard of living and they have some kind of, I don't know, sense of commitment to their employer, and their employer has a sense of commitment to them. It's kind of old school. So because employer asks and workers know they have higher standard of living due to that lower price level, workers take a pay cut. But remember, we're always going to shift back to full employment. So if every worker takes a pay cut, what component of AS is that? What determinant is that? Yeah, input costs. So therefore, lower input costs and AS shifts out. Notice AS shifts out all the way to here, according to their theory. And even though you took a pay cut, look what happened to the price level, which has happened to your standard of living. Yeah, it went up again. So maybe even with the pay cut, your standard of living went up. The evidence is that prices are sticky. They don't usually move downward. But if we got rid of a bunch of stuff that neoclassicalists blame for the lack of adjustment process, how would they like to restructure society? What kind of programs keep us from taking pay cuts? What makes you think, yeah, hell yeah, fire me? What can you get? Well, what's one thing that you get that you pay into that you get when you're unemployed? Good thing you haven't been unemployed before. Unemployment insurance. So what they would like to do is they would like to, and so I want you to write this out, but I'm going to put here UI, TANF, SNAP, SSI, so disability, pro-union laws. All of these things, oh, sorry. All of these things keep people from taking pay cuts. And so a neoclassicalist would say, get rid of these. Because they lead employees to prefer to be fired rather than pay cut. Sorry about this. And on this, on all of these, you have except number one that we did last class. You have a video online of me going over it. Yeah. Pro-union laws. Because all of these things, TANF is welfare or temporary assistance to needy families. SNAP is food stamps, disability, pro-union laws, unemployment insurance. All of those government aid programs keep us from taking pay cuts because we'll just say, hey, listen, fire me and I'll get unemployment insurance, or I'll claim disability, or I'll get food stamps. And in this way, it keeps our economy from self-adjusting. I'm doubting whether I should do this last one right now. I'm giving you a lot. What do you think? Call it. Call it. Okay, good. Yeah, I don't want to overload you. So you have binders due to me.